I'm going to get started. Please, just early apologies for any formatting distortions. There was just a bit of an issue when I was exporting the file, but so anyway, welcome everybody. My name is Susheela Ramachandran. I am a whole human peak performance leadership coach and consultant. I work with individuals to help shift their mindset and their emotional world so they can perform at their peak potential. And I'm here today to support everyone who's joined in creating a self-care toolkit. So a little bit about me. Next slide, please. Oh, Idara, next slide, please. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to share a little bit about me and kind of weave into that, why I'm talking about self-care here today. So I started my, let's say, social activism journey fairly young. I started at 16 years old. I dove into the world of fundraising and project coordination and event planning. And I was very active in the social justice space. And at that point in my life, I really had no idea what self-care was, why it was important, and just kind of focused on the cause, made the cause everything, gave everything of me to the cause, and often at the expense of taking care of myself. And I was able to get away with it for a while until I hit my tipping point at 22. So 22 years old, I experienced my first episode of clinical depression. And that really shifted things for me, where I realized I couldn't keep going the way I was going. And so I chose then to start working with a life coach who helped me really understand, what it is to be human and how taking care of our internal world can amplify the impact that we're looking to make in the external world. And I have been obsessed with self-care and personal development since then. And I've continued to work in the nonprofit social enterprise space and really seeking to blend these two worlds together, because I'd like to see a lot less burnout in the sector, as it's something that I have noticed being in this sector for over a decade now. So I want to start with a question, and I'm going to invite everybody here. I'm going to give you about, let's say, like 2 to 3 minutes. And I want you to share, to think about, what is your definition of self-care? What does self-care mean to you? So I'm just going to give us, let's say, like 2 minutes. And I would just love for you to ponder that. If you have a notebook and a pen, or just somewhere to write, it would be great to just give you some space to do that. Adira, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And feel free to, don't feel like you have to have a sentence. It could be words, they could be images. If you wanted, because your cameras are off, you're welcome to move. But I really would love for you to take a moment to really consider, what does self-care mean to you, and how would you define self-care? So just another minute. All right. So now I'm going to invite you to share in the chat just your responses. What does self-care mean to you? You can put the words, images, whatever. This is just a popcorn style brainstorm. I love that. Recognizing and acting on messages or our psyches and bodies are telling us, and not pushing that away. That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Donna. I'd love to hear some more if anyone's feeling brave enough to share. There's no wrong answers here. I'm just curious to see what your perspectives are. Unconditional love for self, space to be messy, try and make mistakes, freedom to express, connection to spirit, a way to honor my intersectional needs. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Chelsea. I wonder if anyone else is furiously typing away. So I'm going to give it another minute or to see if anybody else feels called to share. Okay. All right. Well, so that's a minute. I'm going to keep continuing, but if you feel called to share, continue sharing in the chat. That's very welcome as well. So Adira, next slide, please. So this is the definition of self-care that I've put together. So I define self-care as the strategies we use to meet our needs to thrive. And this definition, I was really inspired by the work of someone named Marshall Rosenberg, who's created a system called nonviolent communication. And in his work, and from some of the research he's done, and with other colleagues in his field, what they noticed was there are universal needs that are present all across humanity. How these needs are expressed are different, but they nonetheless exist in some way or the other. And when I say strategies, I'm talking about the ways in which we meet those needs. And I very purposely use the word thrive because at least my perception is we're here for humanity to thrive, not just survive. And so that's how this definition kind of cultivated together. And I'm going to go a little more in depth with that. Adira, next slide, please. Great. Again, apologies, the formatting got a bit weird, but I will work with this. So these are the universal needs that's been outlined according to the studies that was done. You can find these in a book called Connecting Across Differences. And at the end of the session, I'll put the link in the chat. So if you're curious about the book, it is an amazing book. But this is the list of universal needs that researchers came up with that we can find present across society. So I want to give us another minute. I would love for you to just quickly look through this list and maybe pick out what would you say are the top 3 needs in this list that are most important to you for you to fulfill. So I'll give us another minute. And again, if you feel called, feel free to share in the chat. And if you're really feeling inspired, you can pick 5. If you're feeling too limited by 3, 5 is okay. Just don't want to overwhelm your system. Okay, great. Adira, next slide, please. So these are some more universal needs. So again, from this list, I invite you to pick 3. So another minute for that. Belonging, nurturing, harmony. That's beautiful. Elizabeth, love, compassion, companionship, authenticity, harmony, and joy. Oh, such beautiful. Those are beautiful needs. So I'm curious, under the categories of physical, meaning, and autonomy, what you would pick as your top 3. Or if you really want to, 5. Chelsea shares integrity, to know and to be known, trust and compassion. Yes, I love that. All right, wonderful. I'm trusting that all of you have a decent list of just knowing and recognizing what's most important to you. And Chelsea again shares rest, touch, and choice. Beautiful. It's beautiful to have that awareness. Next slide, please, Adira. So how do you know when your needs are met? So this is a list of feelings, again, that you can find in this book, Connecting Across Differences, that you may experience, and how you can tell if your needs are met. So I'm going to give you another, let's say like 2 minutes. I'd love for you to look at this list and maybe pick 3 of the needs, the universal needs that you identified, and see if you can match a feeling to how you know those 3 needs are met. So let's say, I'm going to take Lan's example. So let's say my top needs are belonging, nurturing, and harmony. So what feeling do I have when I know belonging is met? What feeling do I have when I know nurturing is met? And what feeling do I have when that need harmony is met? And this is not about being perfect. This is just, I'm just trying to seed some ideas and different ways of thinking. So there's no wrong answer. So I'm going to give you another minute or 2 for you to think about that. And again, if you feel called to share, you're welcome to share in the chat. All right. Joy, you feel giddy. I love that word. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Adira, next slide, please. Okay. So before we continue, I think I'm going to change something up on the fly. Adira, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, great. So based on the universal needs that we identified and the feelings we have identified with those particular needs, I invite us to take this to another level. So I want us to now think about the strategies. So basically the how or the what we can do to meet those identified needs. So here are some examples of strategies. Meditation, walks in nature, drawing, gardening, cultivating self-compassion, putting your hand over your heart, talking to a friend, finishing your accounting, saying no, drinking lots of water, turning your phone off for 30 minutes before bed, playing calming or uplifting music, and swimming. Next slide, Adira. getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep, prayer, taking 10 deep breaths before you starting your day, going to bed at a certain time, waking a certain time, scheduling your doctor's appointments, having a regular therapist, eating healthy food, cooking, watching a funny movie, connecting with your inner child, or really, let's say, the childlike parts of you, dancing, or taking a mini day trip or exploring a new part of your city. So these are just some ways, these are very limited because it's a pretty big list, but these are some ways in which you could meet some of those universal needs. So I invite you to let's give us about I'll give you about 3 minutes, maybe 4 if you really need it, to go to pick your top 3 to 5 universal needs and really looking at what strategy can you use? How can you ensure each of those needs get met? So I'll give us about 3 minutes. And also take into consideration some of those feelings. And Adira, could you go back 2 slides? Oh, going back, not forward. Yeah, one more. Oh, back. Yeah, keep going back. Back again. Back again. Perfect. So here's the list of feelings. So just in case you needed that. So thinking about what strategies would you use to meet those universal needs? And thinking about the feelings that you would attach to those needs. And if you have any questions or you're struggling with something, please feel free to let me know. Or you're feeling stuck, you can either type into the chat, and I would love to have you up on stage. Just another, maybe let's give you 1 or 2 minutes. Okay. So just maybe finishing up that last thought. And I'm going to invite you into another question. And then I promise we have no more questions for a little bit. Just having the feelings slide up right now. Can you think about what feelings have you experienced as part of being in this 10-day convention? Okay, Lan has shared some strategies with us. Walk in nature, self-retreat day when I close off for the world, and watch something mindless. Awesome. If anyone wants to share their strategies, I'm really open to, I'd love to see some of those. Or also if any of the feelings you want to share in terms of thinking about what feelings have you experienced as being part of this convention? Because there are definitely some needs that you've probably been meeting in being here and being present. Okay. So I'm going to now leave all of that with you, and I'm just let it stew. We don't have to, there's nothing to do. It's just I want to share this with you just as a way for you to think about self-care and what self-care is really about. And so hopefully you can kind of take this process and do what you'd like with it. And I'll also check in. I know that this recording will be available, so you can access this list and this exercise whenever you'd like. All right, Adira, if you could go ahead one slide. Yeah, great. All right, so I would like to invite you now to put everything down, whatever writing utensils, all of that stuff. We're gonna now move into something a little bit different. So I took you into more of like an intellectual exercise. But what is also really interesting is to explore self-care in the body. Because how do we know what we feel? How do we know a need is being met? It's when we are actually connected and present in our bodies. So I'm going to take you through a bit of a body scan exercise. And then we're going to do a little bit of a collective reflection, which can be on chat. And then we will move to the next part of our time together. So I'm going to invite you, you're welcome to close your eyes, or you can, if you want to keep your eyes open, I'm going to ask you to shift your gaze down. The idea is to kind of like tune out everything that's going on in your external environment and just really paying attention to you. And I'm just going to invite you to take a couple of deep breaths. Just tuning out all the mind chatter. You can request for your mind to go to lunch right now, or dinner or breakfast, wherever you're tuning in from in the world. And just allowing yourself to be fully present, fully in yourself. And so the next step, so I want you to now take your attention, keeping your eyes closed or having your gaze down, to pay attention to what is happening in your upper mind, in your head. What are some of the feelings or sensations you're noticing there? And I just want you to be present with that for a little bit. Is it feeling fast, slow, warm, cold, tight, open? Are there any particular words that keep coming or images? Just see what's occurring. So it's like we're kind of being a scientist right now, just observing with no judgment, not seeing anything as good or bad. And I want you to bring that same perspective, that same framework in just paying attention to your face. Do things feel open, tight, relaxed, stress? Is it buzzy? Is it calm? Do you see any colors? Again, just meeting whatever's there with curiosity and wonder. Next, I'd like to invite you to bring your attention to your neck and your shoulders. What do you notice as your attention gets placed there? Do you notice that your shoulders are really high up? Are they really down? Are your muscles tight? Are they relaxed? So next we're going to move down to our chest. Our chest being the house for our heart, our lungs, breath, which gives us life. Just noticing what do we experience in our chest? What are the sensations we feel? Are there any images, words even that come up? Sounds maybe? What are we noticing? Moving our attention to our arms. What's present in our arms? What sensations? Are there images, colors, words? Just really being with our arms and all the muscles and the bone and the tissue. Continuing to breathe. So next we're going to move down into our stomach. Bring your attention to your stomach. And being here for a minute. Exploring, being in wonder, curiosity. Next, we go down to our pelvis and our pelvic region where all our reproductive organs are. Getting curious about what the experience is there. Again, no judgment, no right or wrong. Shapes, colors, images, words. Next, we're going to move down into our attention to our thighs and the back of our and our hamstrings. What's present in our thighs, and then moving our attention to our legs. So looking at noticing the experience in our legs. Next, bringing our attention to our feet. What are we experiencing in our feet? Do we notice a buzzing? Does it feel numb? Does it feel warm or cold? Next, we're going to move our attention to our lower back and our hips. What are we noticing there? Moving up to our mid-back. Continuing to stay curious and noticing what's present in our mid-back. Now moving up to our upper back. And what we're noticing in our upper back. And finally, exploring what's occurring or getting curious about what's occurring at the back of our skull. Are there images or shapes, colors, textures, feelings? And now I'm going to invite you to just take a minute, to just take a couple of deep breaths. As you inhale, fill up your stomach like a balloon gently. And as you exhale, you're going to bring your stomach in and empty all that air out. So I'd love for you to take a couple of breaths like this. This is called yogic breath, or what we say full breath. It's what allows us to fully, basically optimally take in oxygen to oxygenate our body. So we're going to take a couple of yogic breaths. Okay. So just bringing your attention back into your stomach and just recognizing the feeling of your feet being on the ground, being aware of the session we're in together, that we're in this session space together, even if it is virtual. And just taking a few moments, I'd invite you to gently, very slowly open your eyes and just come back and be present with us. So I'm going to give you another minute. I'd like for you to just write down some reflections. What did you notice? Maybe what surprised you? And what did you notice needs in yourself needs some tending and care? So I'm going to just give you a minute to note that down. You're, again, welcome to share in the chat. So once you've completed your reflection, you're welcome to continue writing. I'd like for you to think about, based on some of those, just to think about what are some of the strategies for the areas where you could feel if there was any tension or any sense of unease. What are maybe one or two strategies you would use to help bring some ease into those parts of your body? Maybe you were really dehydrated, so drinking more water. Maybe your foot's asleep, so you need to get up and walk a little bit. Or maybe your muscles are really tight. You kind of give yourself a little bit of a self massage. So just taking a few minutes to 2 or 3 minutes to contemplate that. Because self-care is not something that's done outside of us in our head. Self-care is something we do for our bodies, for these vessels that allow us to take our consciousness and bring it into action. So when our body is in an optimal state, then we have greater capacity to perform at a higher level. And again, feel free to share any of your reflections in the chat. I'd love to just spend another minute on this. And then I want to open it up for some, for another exercise. I'm making all of you work for your benefit. Does anybody need any extra time? Please just let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next exercise. Okay. Let me give you, one more minute. I can feel there's some people working. Feeling, oh, okay. Westine, feeling the discomfort of feeling obligated slowly dissipated as I sink into being here and present. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad to hear that. All right. Okay, so we're going to now move into another, well, I don't know if it's as much of an exercise, but I actually wanted to take a pause here and just give the audience a couple of minutes to just share, to ask any questions, or even share any challenges they have with self-care. So if you have any self-care challenges or somewhere where you feel stuck, I'd love for you to share it in the chat so I can address them and help you with that. Give you a little more tailored feedback around self-care. And also opening it up for questions as well at this point.
So I wonder, Susheela, if I could ask a question.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So I'm currently reading this book by Elise Lohan. I probably missed the name.
Okay.
But it's called On Our Best Behavior.
Okay.
The seven deadly sins and the price women pay to be good. And one of the very first sections talks about like rest.
Mm-hmm.
So like talks about rest and how in a lot of like, I guess, in a lot of lives of like women, it's hard to find rest. And I think I actually see that happening to me as well. You know, like wind down, you don't feel like you're productive all the time. So what is your kind of like, how can we pause like as I guess women? And I'm asking for myself.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question. So thank you for asking. So I think there's a couple of, and this, I'm actually really glad you asked this question because I can share a little more in depth with self-care. So I think there's a couple of things, and especially in the world of activism and with respect to women, I think one of the things we all need to get really clear about are what are the expectations we're placing on ourselves and others. And Donna, I see your question, so we'll go to you next. But yeah, like are you clear on what you're expecting yourself? Like what your expectations are? Because oftentimes when we're not clear on what we're actually trying to achieve, everything feels vague and everything feels overwhelming. And especially as women, like, you know, maybe our socialization to be the caretaker of everyone's caretakers, that can be really challenging. The other thing is self-care does not just have to be what you do. It's also about how you talk to yourself. Because that can also deplete your energy. So if you're constantly hard on yourself, or like beating yourself up, criticizing, feeling guilty, feeling shame, like, again, like all those different feelings have their role, but in balance. So I think it's a lot thinking about, like, what do I believe, and how are these beliefs serving me? Do I believe I have to take care of everyone? Okay, so if that's the way I'm going to operate, like, I am likely going to continue burning myself out. If I truly believe that other people aren't capable of caring for themselves, I mean, albeit let's take children out of this, because having children is a whole other ball game. Then we won't cultivate, like, we won't make the time to take care of ourselves, because it's not in alignment with what we actually believe. So I think there's a really important component of really examining, like, what are my belief systems? Like, what do I believe about myself? What do I believe about the world? And using that to start reflecting. And how I show up in relationships. So those are, for me, some of the things that I think about with self-care. And I think the other thing I've noticed, and I've been practicing yoga for over 20 years now, and I'm just about to get my teaching certification, because I finally found the time to do it. But our breath, like, sometimes self-care can be even just the smallest things. Like, the smallest things can make the world of a difference. It doesn't have to be some massive thing. It could literally be like, I start my morning and take 5 minutes to just take 10 deep breaths. Or, I make sure that before I go to bed, I fill, I don't know, 4 like water bottles, reusable, of course, reusable water bottles. So and then my intention is, by the end of the next day, I get through all that water. So even just looking at how we're addressing our basics, our basic physical needs, can really impact our mental state, because it can be really easy to kind of separate, like, and that's one of the things I've noticed in terms of, like, the Western model of how we look at the body. It's like there's physical and mental and social and emotional, but the truth is everything intersects. So what we do in one quadrant or one arena of our life will impact everything else. So that's kind of some of my initial thoughts. Dear, does that help you? Or please let me know if it doesn't, or if there's something you'd like clarified.
No, I think that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, being gentle is really important, because I think, because then self-care becomes something we have to put on our to-do list, which doesn't really help. I think it's more about how we are showing up for ourselves and how we're showing up in our world, and really looking at that. So, great question. Thank you for asking. Okay, Donna. I'm going to look at your question. When things and deadlines get so overwhelming, I can't seem to compartmentalize my own self-care. Thank you for asking. And second question, what would you recommend for people who have disabilities in terms of yoga? My upper body is all that I feel, but I believe despite not feeling the rest of my body, there are things that come through to my upper body. Ooh, that's a very profound question. So let me answer your first one. So when it comes to things and deadlines and the compartmentalization stuff, I think, again, it's the question of, like, what systems do you have in place, and what are your goals and expectations of yourself? And also thinking about, like, what do you need to be at your optimal, perform, or like your optimal energy? What are you eating? What are you drinking? What is your breathing like? What are you telling yourself? So really examining some of that, but then also looking at, like, how do you go about your work? So do you have a really powerful, I'm not sure the scope of your work or what that exactly looks like, but, like, what kind of back-end systems do you use? Do you use your calendar? Do you use Asana? Like, like I find for myself, for example, and honestly, I consider this part of my self-care, where I am someone who needs to mind map things. So when I have a project, I actually find like taking all of this and just like dumping it on a mind map tends to create space in my mind so I don't get overwhelmed. Um, and then also, and this, I'm going to go a little more of a like spiritual philosophical route. And this gets talked about all like spiritual traditions, but this idea of non-attachment, right? To be of the world, but to not be of the world at the same time. So it's like to do everything with intention and care, but also understanding that you are part of a bigger context, and we don't have control over everyone and everything. And all that we can really do is show up the best we can. Because if we're showing up and constantly sacrificing ourselves, that is like what we are telling the world and telling ourselves is how we want to be treated. I really come back to this idea of this line with Gandhi around be the change you want to be in the world, right? And so if you're looking to create a world where, we are truly thriving, it's important for us to identify what helps us thrive. And that in itself can create change. So those are some of my initial thoughts around that. I hope that was really helpful. Oh, thank you. Okay, so your second question, Donna, and then we'll go to Paul. So in terms of people who have disabilities, right, your upper body is all that you feel, but I believe despite not, yeah, I can really appreciate that perspective, Donna. Thank you for thank you, Adira. That's very sweet of you. So so rather than responding to that immediately, I feel like I would want to know a little more context. Like I'm curious, is it you or someone you know who are struggling with a certain, like a physical disability or an emotional, like a physical disability, and I'm curious, I would look at like how that actually impacts their anatomy. But I can give you one example. Okay, you're a wheelchair user. Thank you for sharing. So what I have seen, and I haven't done too much in-depth study around this yet, but my mother also was a wheelchair user for some time. So what I know is there's a system called chair yoga, and I've heard really wonderful things about it. Because again, this idea that everything, if you go on YouTube, you can look it up. And she used to practice this. So my guru, my yoga teacher, she actually modified a lot of, you're very welcome. She actually modified a lot of the yoga postures so that my mother could do it in her wheelchair. Because again, like everything truly is connected. So, what we do in our leg could impact what's going on in our arm, right? So it's this idea that everything is connected, mind, body, and if you want, like, call it spirit or whatever energy it is that runs through us that allows us to be human. So that's where I would direct you. And my sincere pleasure, Donna. Okay, I see we have Paul. Oh, oops, sorry, Paul. I was meant to click on you and I accidentally took you off. Do you want to request to be on stage again, or would you mind typing out your question? I'm so sorry. Okay. I will, please feel free to take your time. I will absolutely answer your question. I didn't mean to exit, to decline your request. So as we're giving space for Paul to share what it is he was wondering about, are there any others who have any particular questions or things they're curious about? Any questions about the exercise? Okay, so I'm guessing not, but I'm also going to keep some space. Paul, please feel free to send me another request or type in the chat, please, and I will respond to it. But I want to just thank everybody for being here. Adira, could you go to the last slide? Yeah, I'm with you, Donna. Mindfulness is amazing and requires self-discipline to maintain. Yeah, and how I would respond to that is if you look at mindfulness as a way of living, as something that you're constantly consciously doing throughout your day, it oftentimes doesn't have to be, again, this idea that we have to do these things separately, I think is what really causes a lot of overwhelm when we think about self-care. So when we can think about, what is like a mindset, like what is a mindset shift I can show up with today? So maybe today, my act of care is just going to, every hour, I'm just going to make sure I take 3 breaths. And because we have these lovely devices, or if you have a timer, just like every hour, like finding like a chime to be like, right, I'm taking 3 deep breaths and I'm releasing myself from whatever's going on in this moment. So I'm all about making self-care. I don't know about just easier, because I think it can just get really overcomplicated. So that's all for me. So I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this workshop. Oh, and if you have any other questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. So you have my that's on the slide. You'll see my website as well as my email. And yeah, and also if you have any feedback in the chat, I'm very curious as to what your experience has been. And thank you to Wesdeen. I think that's how I'm pronouncing it. I just want to share what she said. I began with becoming conscious of my use of negatives in my speech. Yep. I made an effort to change negative statements into positive. That is very powerful. And for me, that is a great example of self-care, because you're allowing more positive. Yeah, actually, I could go into that another time, but yeah, that actually has a neurological and hence physiological implication on your system. Nope, it's Susheela.co. Thank you.